G'day guys, you're back with MiracleMAX. Today in the workshop we have a VZ Commodore 3.6 litre engine and it's a 2005 model. What's wrong with it? Well, it's got a leaky water pump that needs to be sorted out. So I thought I'd invite you along on the process so that we can work on it together. Although the engine itself looks fairly tightly packed, a lot of it is just covers. The engine, for instance, just has these two plastic covers that pop off if you need to gain access. And today, to get to the water pump, we're going to remove this big cover on the front. To remove it, 4 little clips, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, hang on, there's another fella over here I forgot about. Don't forget that one. And then it should pop off. And for those of you who haven't come across these trim clips before, they have little slots in the side that you can just push a screwdriver. Yeah, there are special tools, but just sticking a screwdriver in either side just to wiggle this centerpiece up. Once that centerpiece is popped up like that, the whole thing should, in fact, wiggle out. But sometimes you just got to get that out as well. So to push them back in, or put them back together, you simply put that in, pop them in, and then push the centerpiece down to lock it into place. And with that big cover removed, I'm now going to remove my intake ducting just to gain some access to the water pump hidden down below. I've decided to remove the engine covers either side here. That's just so you guys can get a good look. It's a bit hard to squeeze the camera in there with all that stuff hanging off. The reason this is in for a water pump today is because I did a service on it, and I did notice when it was under pressure, I had the coolant pressure tester on it, that there was a leak. And I could also see some staining, so I'll see if I can just find that for you guys. I can probably even see it there. Can you see that? I'll just zoom in there, bit of zoomage. Yeah, see all that staining there? Okay, so that's from the water pump itself. So we need to address that issue and sort that out and replace the water pump. While the drive belt is still attached, I like to undo these bolts here simply because this pulley doesn't want to turn as much with the belt still attached. So just loosen these blokes up here. I think they're 10 mil, something along those lines. And then it makes it easier to get this pulley off here. Then you can undo your belt by means of this tensioner right here. To remove the drive belt is not that hard. There's simply a tensioner there that needs to be pushed one way by the use of a ratchet or something along those lines. And as you can see, it releases the tension on the belt. And all you have to do is get the belt off all the pulleys. Once that's done, you can just release the tensioner, take out your ratchet, and remove the rest of the belt. Easy peasy. Oh, one heads up too, is I generally take a photo before I pull this belt off. That way you know which way it goes back on. Failing that, generally speaking, it's in the owner's manual as well, or your data provider, or you could find it on the net. While you've got the belt off, have a really good look at it, bend it backwards, see if there's any age cracks. In this case, it's okay. If it was me, while I had the belt off, I would probably replace it, but the customer isn't sure how long he's going to keep this vehicle. But look, there's no age cracks in there, there's no damage or anything like that. So yeah, it should be okay to keep going. Now that we've got the pulley off, we can clearly see that the water pump is leaking. It's coming out that breather hole. I'll show you when I get the water pump actually off, but you can see that that's where it's leaking from. So we need to replace this water pump, put on a new one. To remove your coolant, it's as simple as removing the drain plug that's down the bottom here. It's a little bit hard to see because it's out of focus, but let me use my little pointy thing to show you where it's located. It's just about there somewhere, just in behind that hose. It's just a plug that you undo and drain it into a clean container if you wish to reuse the coolant. If it's new, but I recommend you replace the coolant altogether. While we're draining the coolant, as you can hear in the background, we're going to start loosening up the water pump. It's just a matter of a certain amount of bolts. They're all 10 mil, I believe. I think there's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think there's one down the bottom, 6. So yeah, not that difficult to do, so let's pop him off. So as you can see, there's no need to panic about bolt lengths. They're all identical. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 there was. And you can see on the water pump here that the breather was in fact leaking, and leaking down onto the ground there. It wasn't overly bad, but I saw the staining and that's what put me onto it after I had pressure tested the cooling system. Time for the new one. This is the part number in the GMB brand, W5000, and it comes with a gasket, which is always good. So there's your gasket there, all good, hasn't been broken into, no one has had a play with it previously. Stick that to one side and I'll double check and make sure that it's identical, but it all looks good to me. I've also given the bolts just a bit of a quick tidy up on the wire buff, just to make sure that the threads are in good condition, so it's all ready to go back. Before you even think about putting the new water pump on, you've got to make sure that you get rid of this old gasket. The surface has to be in excellent condition, okay? So make sure you give it a good scrape off and tidy it up so it's ready for the new gasket and water pump. There you go, surface looks pretty good, fairly happy with that. Just zoom in a touch for you. You can see I've tidied it up nice and neat, no more gasket material. It's nice and flat and tidy. I've also wiped it down to make sure that it's nice and dry, ready for the new gasket. Before installing the new gasket and water pump, I like to use some sort of sealant on top of the gasket. This is a paper type gasket, and I like to use something like Ultra Blue that is a sensor safe type of sealant, and that way it'll stop any leaks happening. Look, you don't need a lot on there, you don't want stuff hanging out left, right and centre, but just pop it on there and just wipe it off with your thumb. Just spread it over evenly so that it's got a nice even smear across it, and of course you do the same on the other side. You don't want a whole heap on there, just enough to provide a good seal. And that is ready to go back on the engine once I get all the silicone off my fingers. Water pump goes in place, making sure that you line up all your little bolt holes. Goes that way, like it does. Hit it very lightly with the air tool. Then finish tightening it up with 1.5 ugga-duggers. 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. I like to double check my work, just go around once more. Job's done. Put everything back together. Water pump pulley goes on next. Just notice here there's a couple little raised sections here and here. They'll have to be located into these big holes here and make sure that it sits nice and flush. And of course there's a little step here and there's a raised section here that corresponds to this section here on the water pump. So just make sure that this little section here goes into those bigger holes. There we go, there like that I reckon. Oh, beautiful. Feels nice. Of course you can tighten these up when you've got the belt back on, and then it's a lot easier to hold on to, but just don't forget that. Make sure that you tighten them up so that they don't come loose. But I'm going to tighten them for now, of course, as tight as I can, but then when the belt's on, then I will double check my work. So that's done as tight as I possibly can for now, but once that belt's back on, then I can double check it and make sure that it's tight. One of the problems with these huge serpentine belts is you go to put it on a pulley, then it drops off, and you go to put it on another pulley and it drops off that original pulley. Just keeps going on and on. One trick that I've learned and I've seen, I can't take the credit for it, I must admit, is just using a clippy thing of some description, making sure the flats are in properly. You can use paper clips, you can use anything that'll work, but basically putting this onto an open pulley, that way it'll hold the belt while you move on further. So for example, that bottom pulley, the belt's just sitting there ready to fall off. If I stick on one of these fellas, it should hold it in place. Just like that. Easy peasy. And don't forget I took photos originally, so I know how the belt goes, I know how it's routed around the path, all the different pulleys, and now I can just hold it in place with my little clippy clips. Now I should be able to put on an extra little clip. And there we go. That should at least hold that in place while I move on further. Cool, huh? And because all those clips are holding it in place, all I've got is my alternator pulley to get put on, but it won't reach, of course. So I've got to get onto my tensioner here. And it goes on that simply. Super, super easy using those clips. Hey, don't forget to remove those clips, otherwise it could be very, very messy. And as mentioned before, now that we've got some tension on the belt here, it'll hold this pulley and stop it from slipping. We'll double check our bolts there, make sure that they're tight. So water pumps all back together, pulleys, belt, all the good stuff. Now I haven't added the old coolant as yet, the stuff that I managed to rescue. What I've done is just pressure test the system to see if it's going to hold pressure. Reason being is if it's got a huge leak, you don't want to lose all your coolant. So I've just sat it on there for a little while. Took a while to pump up, of course, because all the air is compressible. But now I'm going to have a brief look around and see if there's any leaks that I should be aware of. And if not, then I can happily put in my coolant and make sure that it's ready to get started. Run till hot, and of course then I'll pressure test it again and make sure that there are no leaks. But at this point in time, yeah, it looks good. No droppage. Intake ducting goes back on. In my case, the engine covers go back on. And the front cover goes on next. All the clips go in place. Push down. And of course all the others as well. It's now ready to be run till hot, and checking our coolant level, of course, making sure that the concentrate is correct as well. Then I'll pressure test it once it's hot. Just have a good visual of the belt and make sure that it's aligned correctly. There's no strange noises, etc. So we'll just wait for it to warm up. I've got it up to its normal operating temperature for this vehicle, and now I'll go and pressure test it and make sure that there's no leaks. So I've had the pressure tester on there for 15-20 minutes, I guess. Hasn't really dropped at all, so I'm happy that we have no leaks. I'm going to have a good visual now just to make sure it's okay, but this has been from hot, so I'm pretty happy that there's no leaks. Just back from a road test with the VZ Commodore water pump and checked for leaks, no visible leaks, and the temperature gauge sat exactly where it was meant to be. So I'd say this is a success. I'll get the customer over the next few days to check the coolant level to make sure that it hasn't dropped and that there are no visible leaks. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and feel free to comment down below. Of course, don't forget about that notification bell. You don't want to miss any future videos. So until next time guys, this is MiracleMAX signing off. I will catch you later.